Great day, everyone. How are you doing today? I want to welcome you to another episode of the Talk to Me Chef podcast. I'm your host, Chef Diamond McNulty, founder and CEO of Chef Diamond and Friends, creator of the entire program just to teach young chefs how to cook, executive chef at Taste the Diamond Catering here in Atlanta, Georgia. And today, on the Talk to Me Chef podcast, we're here to do one thing, and that's share story of those amazing chefs or culinary experts that have done great things within the industry so that we can inspire others that come along the way. And today is nothing short of amazing because we got a special guest, an executive pastry chef, right? She focuses on research and development, but her sweets are delicious. There's no one that's topping her, right? When I talk about custom cakes, desserts, all the above, I'm going to bring her in. Chef Nikki, come on in. Chef Nicole Thibou, come on in. How you doing today, Chef?
Hi, good
Come on,
morning. What
let's
an
rock
intro.
and roll. Oh, you are amazing, Chef. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Before we even get started, Chef, is there anything you want to share with our audience?
Oh my goodness. No, I'm just excited to share my story and, hopefully a little expertise and background and, try to guide the youth that's looking toward a career path similar to mine. So
Right. So, and when you think about the culinary industry, right? So let's take it really quickly. Let's go about your starting journey. How did you begin? Where were you born and raised? And how did you get into culinary? Was it a passion at a young age?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in New York, so in Queens, raised in Long Island, so right outside of Queens and Manhattan. So food and culture is huge in New York because you have such a diverse melting pot of people. So, from a really young age, I was surrounded by all different cultures, different celebrations of holidays. I can remember in school, having latkes and applesauce during the Jewish holidays. And so, I feel like I was really exposed to a lot of different things at a young age. So I had an appreciation for food, from a young child. And then I also was blessed to have a lot of chefs in my family. So one of my uncles, Uncle Larry, he is a phenomenal chef. He works overseas. He's actually in Africa right now. He opens restaurants and hotels out overseas. And so he's great and been a great influence and just great home cooks with a Caribbean background. So, lots of food, lots of flavor. But yeah, so I started really young. My first job was in a bakery when I was 15 years old. And I worked in an Italian bakery in Long Island. And that's kind of where my love for all things sweet and decorating came from.
And most of the time it starts when you're younger, right? Kids are, for myself, it was in the kitchen with my grandmother. And I can't tell you the hot water cornbread, all of those good things that she was cooking up, right? Can you share your first experience inside of the kitchen and what did that look like?
Yeah, so similar to you with my grandmother. My grandmother is from Trinidad. We had a lot of classic Caribbean cakes, rum cake, which obviously I couldn't eat until I was older. But my grandmother made a really great coconut bread that she's known for. And it's kind of a cross between a cake and a bread. And it's dense and it's got shredded coconut and the fresh coconut water in it. And it's just amazing. And so I remember, sitting with her and watching her make her famous coconut bread and, everyone kind of falling in love. And that made me realize how special, cooking and baking was.
Right. And because you held on to it for so long, right?
Yeah.
So that passion at a young age. So now holding on to it. Now your grammar school and high school years, how did you continue to hold on to culinary arts throughout that journey? And then who guided you? Were there any mentors?
Yeah. So, I think it was different for me as I didn't at that age really think about culinary as a career choice. So I worked at that bakery from 15 until I graduated from high school. So I learned a lot in those, 3 years working there. And, I was hired as a store clerk, we call it a store girl, right? So I worked the register, helped the customers, but I was really interested in the decorating. And so the pastry chef, he would show me how to make buttercream roses and how to write on cakes. And so I really, was kind of always in the back, like, what are you doing today? Oh, how do you do that? So that was really where I gained my interest and, that was peaked, but I didn't do a lot outside of that, out of that job. I was always an artist, always creative. And so that was kind of another creative outlet for me. I cooked a lot. I'm the oldest. So I cooked a lot for my siblings, baked a lot for my siblings, but I didn't really think of it as a career option until actually after I graduated from college.
So there you are, right? So you went to college for something totally different. So walk us a little bit through that, Chef. What was that thinking process behind that? Because you obviously chose your first path for a reason, right?
Yeah. So like I said, I still and always was creative, was always drawing. I mean, from a super young age, drawing and sketching and painting. And so, my love was really art, my first love, and still is. And I knew that I wanted to do something kind of in that vein. And so I went to the University of Tampa. I studied fine art and art history. And I fully had a different career path in mind of like, working in a museum or, being a curator, something like that. And as you know, your path changes through the course of life. But when I graduated, I ended up moving out here to Atlanta. I worked in graphic design. That was my first job out of college. And while I loved the creative part of it, I didn't love sitting in front of a desk all day, every day. And it dawned on me that I wanted to do something else. And so fairly quickly into that career, I realized I wanted to go to culinary school. And that's kind of how I made the transition.
Got it. But at least that pathway guided you to get some additional experience when it came to utilizing that passion that you had in art. Because I tell you, it's certain chefs, right, that have an eye where you can create anything like you. And if everyone that's watching, I'm telling you, have to see her cakes. Check out Chef Nikki Bates. She can turn anything into a cake. I'm talking skyscrapers, Porsche
That's
cars,
right.
anything. And it was really, you were at least one of the first chefs who actually showed the creative side that I seen that had that gift. Not everyone has that gift.
It's something to be able to bridge the two, right? Because creativity in that way is a natural talent, and then you can expand upon it by learning technique. And I feel similarly to cooking. A lot of that is natural instinct and your taste buds that you're born with, and then you can learn more and how to finesse those things. It's kind of like if you have it, you have it, right? You have the secret sauce and it works. So for me, it was cooking and baking was just bridging the gap, and it was just a different medium of art. Instead of using, charcoal and pencils, it was using fondant, and cake.
Come on. Come on. That is awesome. Right? So inside baking and pastry, what are you most passionate about when it comes to, because I see you create also amazing desserts too. So you have the desserts and the cake. What do you love most and why?
Ooh, wow. So I love the cakes because it's really building something from the ground up, something from your imagination or your customer's imagination and making it come to life. And sometimes it's one of those like trust the process things. Often I'm in the kitchen and I'm working on something and I'm like, I'm not seeing it, even for myself, I'm not seeing how this is going to come together. And then, I complete it and I'm like, oh, wow, like this really, it really came together. It looks really good. So that's always super exciting to see something like come from nothing and be able to build it into something really exciting and something to help people celebrate their occasions. I think that's what I love most about cake.
That fulfillment that you give to others, because 9 times out of 10, everyone that's ordering it is like, I can't create this. Thank you, Chef. I appreciate your talent and your gifts, and it shows your value too, Chef. What was the most challenging part of your journey within the culinary industry?
I think it was just figuring out really where I wanted to be. Where we met, working together in hotel kitchens, you give a lot of yourself, a lot of your talent and your creativity, and you don't always see the reward of your gift when you're giving it and using it in that way. It becomes really monotonous and it becomes really mechanical because you're there to do a job. And so really it was finding my lane and how I can use, my talents and my experience and also do something that I really enjoy doing.
Well, they say that your gifts will make room for you, right? And then that's one thing I can say about our relationship over the course of time. You can really see us both operating in our gifts and how staying in that lane allows you to continuously ascend to new levels. So that is inspiring, Chef, because all of the things that you're doing right now is amazing.
Thank you.
So how do you stay updated on the culinary trends, or are you the trendsetter? Right?
I wouldn't say I'm a trendsetter. Now, I will say some things in the past I have seen come around, and I'm like, I remember doing that like 8 years ago, and no one was doing that. So, a little bit of trend setting in there,
Yeah.
but definitely super important to follow trends, especially in my current role, as an R&D chef. It's really important to follow the trends, to see what's out in the market, to see what your competition is doing as well, because you want to stay competitive and you want to stay relevant. And that is more important than ever now, especially with social media and, things going viral, things being Instagrammable. You have to stay current on those things. So, luckily for me in this field, I have access to a lot of different programs and software to be able to facilitate that research, and, a lot of vendor relationships that I'm able to like curate and find out like, oh, hey, what's the trending chocolate pairing for 2025? What's the new it flavor? And then that kind of helps me in my development process.
That's awesome, right? So research has to be, and it's important. So just to talk to the young chefs, is there any advice that you give them right now?
Yeah, I would say, cooking is fundamental, right? You can always find a job, a career in a kitchen, and find something that fulfills you. That's not just a job and not just the day to day. That old cliche saying, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And also know that there are other avenues, right, than just working in a kitchen. There is, like what I do, there's R&D, working for corporations, and, kind of behind the scenes of all of these really big culinary franchises that you can have a lot of impact on, and then there's restaurants, there's hotels, there's, cruise ships, there's private chefs, there's, nutrition, there's dietitian, so really figure out where you want to be, what's important to you, and that will make, your job way easier.
Right. And I want to thank you for that, chef, too, because it's important. I want our young chefs and those that are even artists, right? As you mentioned, because I've spoken to a lot of different artists, and I can tell because you're the best of both worlds, right? So I talk to chefs and I talk to artists, but you being able to turn art into food, that is amazing. What is the toughest criticism that you've received inside of the kitchen? Because, being a chef coming up inside certain kitchens back in the day, that it's different than it is now. So, and how did you navigate it?
Ooh, there's food like art, right? Is why they call it culinary art. It can be subjective, right? Because you're not going to please every palate with the things you like. Certain things that I may like, the person sitting next to you might despise it. So
yes,
it's really figuring out, like a baseline of flavor and nostalgia is really important. And I think if you can hit those two, then you kind of have a win. I know at times, like if I've pushed things a little out of the box with flavors, you might get a little pushback. And so that's where I would say I've probably had, a little critique is, oh, well, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But it's always like, what was it good though? It might have been different, but was it good? And I will say one of the largest setbacks that I did have was, after the pandemic and COVID era, after having COVID, I did lose my sense of taste. And so for a while, that impacted my taste buds and, how I was able to create. And that was really difficult for me because I was questioning myself. I'm doing recipes and building these things out. And well, I've made this before and it's just not tasting the same. And then I had to realize that it was a physical barrier, so definitely helps you think at things through a different lens.
That is interesting too, as you think about appreciating the small things, right? As the senses of taste.
Right.
Because without it, it's like, you don't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and your taste and your smell are connected, right? So if you can't taste, you can't smell. And it just throws off your whole, sensory process. And so that was really strange. And I'm glad that it's back.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job.
God, I got to figure out something different. But you had art to fall back on, so it didn't matter, chef.
That's right.
Hello, my name is Diamond McNulty. I'm the executive chef here at Chef Diamond and Friends, and I want to welcome you to our amazing programming. We have at-school programming where we have weekly or monthly programming, and we also have our Meet the Chef experience where our chefs come out and meet with the students and have book signings as well. At home, we have homeschool throughout the day, we have after school, and we also have family engagements on Friday. So no matter if you're a young chef, mighty chef, or if you're a diamond chef, we want to see you inside of the kitchen. We want you to compete in our champion chef competitions And we want to have you be featured in our Young Chef magazine. So I look forward to meeting with you, chefs. Visit www.chefdiamondandfriends.com. Can't wait to see you inside of the kitchen. Take care. Have a wonderful day.
Now, what was one of the most challenging dishes that you've ever created?
When we worked in the hotel scene, we would get these kind of last minute chef tables, and I think that was probably one of my most challenging scenarios and dishes. Like, hey guys, we're having a chef's table tomorrow for 12 people, and you have to pull together this really elaborate dessert and a palate cleanser,
right,
while still preparing banquets for 300 and 500 people. And so I remember like pulling this dessert together, this kind of deconstructed, was the thing at that time, but this kind of deconstructed dessert. It ended up pulling it off. It was great, but I was stressed out.
Yes. So how to manage stress inside of the kitchen. That's a course right there.
That should be actually a course in culinary school, because, you have to sometimes go in the walk-in and cry.
Go in that freezer
and
let that get to you, because that heat, you're under fire.
Yes, exactly.
Now, what is one of the biggest misconceptions that you believe that people have about a chef?
I think people think that it's all glamorous all the time. Having so much exposure to culinary right now, like with the Food Network, with, all of the Instagram chefs and, things like Pinterest. And then especially now with like AI, where people are doing these AI recipes, and the photos are AI generated. So it sets an unrealistic expectation of like some things that can actually be achieved with food, when you're looking at it from a screen, from something that's computer generated. So yeah, I think people think that, it's glamour, it's recognition, it's everyone, loving what you do all the time, and that's not always the case. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of long hours, and it can be really tough on your body. And I think that people don't realize how strenuous, working in the kitchen can really be.
Yeah, you have to build up that.
Yeah, I say, like, I always knew the pain, that I felt and the tension that I felt in my body working in kitchens every day, those long 12-hour days. But it wasn't until I stopped and I was like, oh my goodness, my hands hurt, my fingertips hurt, my, like down to my toes hurt, until my body was able to really fully rest. I didn't realize like how much, strength and, how strenuous it was on all parts of your body, because you use every single part, especially when you're baking, you're rolling pins, you're mixing with your hands, so it's kind of head to toe.
Right. So you're using every part, right?
Every part.
Including your brain.
Yeah.
I want to tell you, because baking and pastry is an art, and you have to get it down to a science.
It is indeed a science. You've got to be good at math and conversions, and you really have to follow recipes. And that's kind of one of the things I always say. I have a goddaughter and she's 16. She really likes to bake, but she likes to take liberties with her baking. And she will always say like, well, I don't know why it didn't work out. And I said, well, you have to perfect the base recipe first. Then once you perfect it, you can go in and tweak it and make it your own. But until you get that base right, you can't make any changes, because you're not there yet. But once you get it and you baked it several times and you know that this recipe works, then you can go ahead and say, I'm going to add more salt. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change that.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing too. As you mentioned, the fundamentals. I believe that's what I loved most about culinary school, was my first and second block, because it gave me the lens I needed to know to understand how to navigate any recipe or any food item that within product identification, of course, right? Now, looking now, what cuisines or cultures inspire you the most?
So of course, I'm always inspired by my family and Caribbean flavors. So I love using things like coconut and mango and, tamarind and, all of those things, rum. But then, French pastry is just so classic and rich. Like you can never go wrong with vanilla bean, custard. You can never go wrong with anglaise, all of those things that are just so classically delicious. And then being that my first job was in an Italian bakery, I'm always super inspired by Italian desserts as well, cannolis and rum babas and things like that, where a lot of people haven't even had those desserts, so I had a lot of exposure to some really delicious things at a really young age. Fruit tarts with, all the fruits, and strufoli, which is an Italian dessert during the holidays, which is these little like honey donut balls, and they pile them into this big tower. It's just amazing. So just so many things. I think you can take inspiration from anywhere and then kind of tweak it and make it your own.
Yeah, and then that plays into experience. So that's why I love just sharing your story today too, Chef, is because that experience matters, right? From the time that you first transitioned into culinary school, and then all of this time that you spent in the industry, I can only imagine how many recipes that you've come across.
Oh yeah, and that's part of R&D and development, culinary innovation, all of those things, just exploring, never being afraid to try a new recipe, as many recipes as I've developed, as I own.
Yes.
I always come across something new that is maybe just a hair different than a recipe that I currently have. And then I will make it and say, okay, is this better than the current recipe I have? Or maybe, I see they added a little extra this in this recipe. Maybe I should do that in mine and see, what happens to it. So, there's always room for development. And that's the playfulness of baking, right? And like there's always room for improvement.
Now, looking back too throughout the journey, how important was relationships and teamwork, right? In the industry and for yourself in life?
Yeah, I mean, relationships are super important, I think, in any career, but in the kitchen, the culinary world is so small. Like, we've known each other for, I don't even know how long, 12 years.
Long time.
Right. So, to maintain those connections, to have those people that you come up with and that you have a similar love and passion for the same industry is super important. Like, I know I can always call Chef Diamond and say, hey, I'm thinking about, doing XYZ. What do you think about this? And he'll be able to give me some really valuable input. And I know that I've been able to do the same for him. And
Definitely.
it's super important to have those relationships and cultivate them so that you never know when you need to reach back and draw on those people that you've met over time.
Right. No, that's so important too. And life is a continuously compounding. I call it compounding successes to compounding relationships. It's all about compounding everything, because as you continue to grow and develop, you become this individual who has this wealth of knowledge. Now, Chef, looking back too, what legacy do you hope to leave in the culinary world?
Oh, I, at the end of the day, really want to be a beacon for Black women, Black people in the kitchen. When you talk about the history of us in kitchens, we were often not seen or heard. Our culture and our food and our recipes span generations. And I think it's super important to continue to talk about and bring forth those legacies so that they don't get lost and that the new generation can continue to learn and grow from those things. And, even if we tweak them over time, we still have the ancestors here, reminding us where that came from. So I think that's super important. But I, always envisioned myself as kind of like the Black Martha Stewart, right? Like, how can we bring that to our homes, and how can we share our experiences, which may be really different from things that we're seeing on TV right now. But like, we have homes, we have families, we have, shared recipes over generations. And I think it's really important to spread that knowledge and keep us interconnected.
Chef, you're going to do just that and more. I'm telling you. So get ready. Get ready. Now, even right now, too, are there anything that our audience or young chefs watching can look forward to from you as far as over the next year or two or plus?
Yeah, so, right now, a lot of my work is behind the scenes, being an R&D chef, but I am looking forward to hopefully doing some classes with our young people. I always want to share my knowledge and share my experiences. So I would love to, host some classes maybe some cooking parties for kids. I have a 5-year-old, and I think it's really important to get the little ones in the kitchen early and get them excited about food, especially at this age when they are super picky and, their palates may not be really broad, but it's a fun way to kind of show them all of the things that they can see and taste and experience through food. So yeah, I'm excited, and hopefully all of those things to come.
Oh, it's coming, Chef. And so much more too. And then before we eat, I have one more question, Chef, because I really want our audience to have the lens into the culinary world, because it's a big difference between, as we say, we were in the hotel industry when we met, between like being operating within the industry and actually taking the step to build your own. Is there any advice or insight that you'll give someone looking to do either or in navigating that space?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with either option, right? You just have to know what works for you. If you love, working in that hotel environment and that kind of hustle and go, or the restaurant industry, do that. Do what makes you happy. If you are more of a self-starter, starting your own business is always an option. But I think it's always really important to be real with yourself about the work that it takes to push yourself and work on your own, and keep yourself motivated and like grounded to push your business forward. It's a lot of work. And that's something that I constantly strive for as well, balancing, working a culinary corporate job, but then also having a business of my own and juggling those two things and figuring out, where the push and pull comes, is super important. And it's okay to not have it perfect, on either account, and then just do it. Just
come
try
on,
it.
Chef.
Yeah.
Yes, come on, Chef. As you can tell, Chef Nikki bakes, right? Amazing, Chef. I just got to thank you. Is there anything you want to share with our audience that you haven't? Any takeaways?
No, not really. I really enjoyed the conversation, and anyone can reach out to me on socials if they have any questions. I'm always available. I love chatting. I love talking about food. I love talking about baked goods. So reach out, and yeah, this was fun.
Man, thank you again, Chef. So as she said, Chef, I got to thank you for joining us and sharing your journey. As you mentioned, and you're behind the scenes most of the time. So that's why I thank you, because I was able to pull you to the front, and actually because you're vibrant, you're exceptional. You've done so much in the industry, and I witnessed it firsthand, hands-on with you.
Yeah.
Amazing creations, right?
Thank
So
you.
anyone that's interested in a specialty cake, definitely reach out to Chef Nikki Bakes. If you can't find her, reach out to me, and I'll ensure to get you to her. But I just want us to highlight and build you up as you continue to ascend to new levels. So let's take over the world, Chef.
Yeah,
Come on.
that's right.
So thank you again. And our audience, if you have any young chefs that's interested in cooking, go to chefdiamondandfriends.com. We have so many amazing offerings. You can go to Shop Chef Diamond for culinary tools and more. But we look forward to seeing y'all next time, not only inside the boardroom, but inside of the kitchen. Y'all have a wonderful day. Take care.
Great.